Hello, welcome to another episode of the Jericho Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Connor McReynolds. We're firmly back in lockdown now, so while we're unable to put on live shows, this podcast is our way of connecting you with some of our fantastic regular acts. This week I'm speaking to an incredibly funny and talented musical comedian. He might also be the most charming man in comedy. I am chatting to Jon Long. I'll be asking him about how comedy's been treating him this year, about bringing together his passions of comedy and environmentalism, and about his comedy beginnings. And of course, I'll be asking him some pressing questions. We'll also be playing you a message from our wonderful friends at Oxfordshire Mind, and later we'll be playing you a clip of Jon performing live at Jericho Comedy. First though, here is the wonderful Jon Long. Jon Long, hello, and thank you so much for joining me on the Jericho Comedy Podcast.
Hello, how you doing, Connor?
Very well, mate. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to be chatting to someone. This is lovely.
This is very lovely.
Bit of purpose to my day. Thank you for that.
How have your days been? Obviously, we're in lockdown too, so gigs aren't going at the moment. How are you adapting to the kind of new world of comedy? Have you done much of the sort of online stuff or any of the... I know you did a drive-in for us at Jericho.
That was a lot of fun. I think that the beauty of Lockdown 1 as opposed to Lockdown 2 is... as all sequels are never quite as good. I think the beauty of the original was that it was in a beautiful weather. And,
yes.
And so, like you said, the driving gigs were fantastic. At Jericho we were just talking about them, weren't we? Like the idea of doubling up in a field. We did a gig on a hay bale, and they were like, "That's brilliant." Now jet off to the other side of the field, and there's a few more cars up there. I loved it. That was a bit weird because obviously in the cars you can't hear people laughing, but you had to look into individual cars to see which pockets were enjoying it and which weren't.
Yeah. How did you find, because a lot of your stuff as well, you like to interact with the audience too. You like to kind of ask questions of people.
Yeah.
How was that challenge of sort of adapting to performing to cars, essentially?
Yeah. The novelty of the situation made that actually it was probably slightly more easier than normal because there were so many more things to play with. And everything was new and fun and interesting to everyone. So rather than doing the sing-along saying, "Oh, just the men" or whatever, you can say just the blue cars or whatever. You go by different things or whatever. And I like that people were flashing their lights if they agreed with certain things. I was doing a gig for Jericho, and Ben Pope. Do you know Ben? I'm sure.
Oh yeah, wonderful Ben. Yeah.
He was on just before me, and he was doing a bit where he has got a great bit about his dad being a hoarder and how he just collects. He goes through his garage and finds all these weird things his dad's collecting. He finds a suitcase full of pine cones. He's trying to work out why his dad's hoarding pine cones. I think he's got loads of great jokes. I don't want to burn his material. But a very beautiful line about what are you trying to do? Kidnap Autumn? Stuff like that. I won't do his material, but it's great. It is great. But halfway through that material, in a way that you can only do in that situation, clearly what happened is a guy in one of his cars found a pine cone in his car and just thought, "Oh God, I've got a pine cone." And the excitement of not knowing what to do meant he just opened his car door and threw this pine cone at Ben, and it soared through the sky. He had to duck out of the way. And he picked it up and held it aloft, and there was an enormous whir beeping and flashing, and everyone loved it. It was the most incredible 3D heckle. But I was saying afterwards, I was like, "Ben, that was brilliant." And he was saying it was in hindsight, but at the time, just seeing him throw something like a pine cone when you don't know what it is looks like a lot like a rock. Do you know what I mean? So for a brief second, he thought he was getting stoned alive and.
That's the last thing any comedian would need after such a long time out and being out of practice after the first lockdown.
Yeah, exactly.
To then have to contend with sort of ducking at the right time to avoid pine cones.
It was beautiful, though. And I mean, how interactive can you be? It felt like as well, I don't know if you found this, with all of the gigs post the lockdown in any kind of way, it was that people are so happy to be out of the house doing something again.
Oh, yeah.
That the sheer joy in the audiences was really palpable. So anything that was happening, it was very hard for anything to be negative. Everything was
so true. Yeah,
fun and hilarious. And
they were really like special atmosphere. I don't know if you find it as well with like the other acts. There was such excitement, but also nerves like I think a lot of us
Oh
hadn't really
yeah,
felt since like some of our first gigs.
it
Because
really
it
did
just
feel like.
we'd not done it in 4 or 5 months, and we were sort of in that position of being so out of practice where a lot of us were kind of thinking, "Can I still do this? Like, do I remember my material?"
Yeah,
It was
you're
mad.
100% right. That's exactly what it felt like. It felt like those first few gigs again, didn't it? Where everyone's a bit nervous and pacey at the back there. I
Yeah.
I was doing a gig with Esther Manito, and she was saying like, it was her first gig back, and she was sort of going, I've not felt like this. I think this is. She was saying I'm even more nervous than when I first started doing it. And the
Yeah.
same thing as you said. I'm not going to remember how to do this, and it took only a few gigs afterwards you got into it again. But it was interesting, and I think the other thing was hanging out with people were really. It was nice to hang out again, and all the things you take for granted, like that. So much
Yeah.
of your social life is caught up in seeing all your friends at gigs, and then when you take that
Exactly
away,
that.
you're like, oh god.
Yeah.
So the green
Yeah,
rooms
you're
where
so
everyone was
right.
just proper like having deep chat conversations, like how are you? No, and how are you? No, how are you? Really getting into it. It was nice, but yeah, frightening.
Yeah, we've got all of that to look forward to again in December and January, I
Yeah,
suppose.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, how have you been filling the time sort of in lieu of regular gigs? Have you been writing a lot of new stuff, or is it kind
yeah.
of just a bit difficult to? I don't want to be one of those people that's kind of like, during lockdown, I achieved so many things. I learned 16 new languages, invented an instrument, like all these kind of things. But have you been creative, or have you understandably taken a little bit of a step back and just given yourself a break?
It's a yeah. I it's interesting in different areas, different things. I know what you mean. I think a lot of people have sort of that lockdown envy of other people, and how was
Hmm.
your lockdown versus mine, and did I waste mine, and all that sort of stuff. But I,
Hmm.
I was doing a bit of that because I was thinking, oh, I'm not making enough videos, enough content. But I think you've got to do what if that's not naturally who you are, you're not going to.
Yeah.
You've got to. You can't force yourself into these things. I did right at the beginning. I wrote an EP, and the initial energy and the novelty of the first lockdown meant that I think everyone had a little burst of energy and a bit of
Yeah.
productivity, and I certainly had a bit of that. And I made an EP about 4 songs. Did that in about 2 weeks, and put that out. And then after that, sort of completely ran dry of ideas, and
Yeah.
totally
But
felt
still,
useless.
an EP to come out of lockdown having released an EP, that is no small thing. That's
Yeah,
very cool.
it's a thing I can point towards exactly, and it's actually quite a nice little time capsule now because it was recorded in 2 weeks in March, and it's actually quite naive because it was still full of the optimism of isn't this a weird novelty being stuck indoors and the sleeping the horror hadn't seeped in yet of the oh god this is not going away, is it? So it is an interesting little moment, and since then I've been concentrating on other things, trying to write basically things I can do. I was trying to write a lot of stand up, but I was finding it too hard because um, there's only so much I can try it on my poor girlfriend before she wants to pull her hair out.
Sure. Yeah.
And without the audience there, it really does feel. And there wasn't the gigs I was doing. I felt like I wanted. I didn't feel like I could just try loads of new material on. I wanted to
Yeah.
because there was only
Yeah.
so many of them.
True.
So
Yeah,
I
I think
haven't been
we've
writing much
missed
down.
that sort of sandbox kind of those gigs where you feel comfortable because you know you've got enough coming up that you can slip 4 minutes of new stuff in, try it out, see what you think. Yeah, we've lost that luxury recently.
100%. Yeah. Well, where we first properly met and hung out was that gig in I can't remember what it's even called. I think is it Dead Set or something like that?
Oh
In
yeah, of course, yeah. And
and that was one of those gigs, wasn't it? The sandbox gigs, as you said, like the ones where
yeah.
everyone sat around beforehand, knowing that we're just about to go on to 6 drunk people in a pub in London,
Yeah,
none of whom are really going to remember this, and so
absolutely.
it becomes an entirely selfish endeavour, and we're all sat there with our notebooks, trying 100% new stuff. That's totally gone, isn't it? Because
I would assume so. Yeah, I've not heard of it, unfortunately. It was a lovely little gig. I very much enjoyed
yeah,
the, particularly, traveling in from London or to London rather from Oxford. You're on a coach for an hour and a half or 2 hours
of
to get
course.
there. You do 10 minutes and then you've got the 2 hour coach back to think to yourself, no, that did not work. They did not go for that at all. But I sort of miss that part of stand up, the kind of contemplating the gig on the way back from the gig.
Yeah, I suppose that gig was very different for me and you, because actually for me that was relatively near me, and so I think that when you analyze how good or bad a gig was, a big part of the equation is how far did I travel for that experience.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
definitely one of the X's and of the Y's and things, in the equation. So for me, it was entirely disposable, that one, because that's one of the few gigs in London that are actually quite near to where I was living. So,
I
but
see.
so I would treat that like very much like who cares? And if it goes horribly wrong, I'm home in 15 minutes. It's not an issue. But you're right. Yeah, if you've gone on a coach, it's a whole different experience. I get the same when I go to Jericho. You see, Jericho is probably to
Of
you a
course.
very comfortable, warm home gig where you know the parameters and you can relax. For me, I've got a little bit. I like to try new stuff there because it's so warm and lovely. But at the same time, I've got like, right, well, don't just try any old shit, because you've got to think about this for a long time on the way. Yeah, dwell on that
Yeah, you
on the
have to
Oxford Tube.
give yourself the reward of feeling good on the way home about it.
On the Oxford Tube, exactly. Yeah, it's a long old way when you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you always do when you come to Jericho. We so love having you there. Your comedy is very friendly to our crowd. It's very well suited to a Jericho audience. For anybody who's listening who perhaps maybe hasn't had the pleasure of seeing you before, John, what would you say is a kind of typical piece of Jon Long material? How would you sort of describe the Jon Long experience?
I wish I called it that now. That sounds great. That sounds like yeah. That's what's nice psychedelic 60s take on it, and I like it. But I don't know really. I think if I was to describe myself, I typically, like you said, I try not to say that I am this, but on stage I certainly am. Try to be as affable as I can.
Yes.
I think when I first started, I did, because you try and be lots of different things, and you try and emulate some of your heroes, and maybe I think some of my heroes were quite acerbic and ranty, maybe. And I
Oh yeah.
used to try occasionally and do a bit of this really annoys me and this really grinds my gears, and here's what I think about this,
Yeah.
and that really doesn't suit me, and people don't want to hear that. And you are
Who were
beholden.
those kind of influences that you were looking up to who were doing that kind of thing?
Well, I loved Dylan Moran so much, or Dylan Moran rather,
Mm,
and
yeah.
and he was his whole, and like Jack D when I was really young, like he was one of the early, when I was a kid and you're just sort of aware of comedy in the peripheries. He seemed to
Yeah.
be around a lot, and I did like Happy People too. Like I liked Eddie Izzard as was the other end of the extreme, and I'm much more. I
Oh
think
yeah.
I'm much more that end. I think in terms of.
Yeah, in terms of your current persona.
Yeah, not necessarily in style or anything, just in terms of outlook on life. Like I'm much more positive on stage, probably more positive on stage than I am in real life. But I think what you got to realize what it took too long to realize is that it's not about who you feel or who you are on stage. It's how you're coming across, because you've got to be in keeping with that. And you can,
Mm.
and maybe you can adapt how you come across, but more likely than not, you can't really. And you've just got to work with what you come across as. And when I come on stage, the side of me that comes out is the side of me, I guess, which is very friendly and very keen to make sure everyone's having a good time and not want to upset
Mm.
things too much. Not to say there is a sort of impetuous side to me that's quite, got anger and bitterness and like everyone else, but that side
Sure.
doesn't suit me on stage, and so I think some people are funniest when they're miserable. Not miserable, but faux miserable. But
Yeah.
that's not me. I think. So I'm sort of leaning into it more as I go along and embracing it. That I'm there to try and be. I feel like my role is to try and be pretty upbeat and happy, even if I'm taking the piss out of something or saying something's annoying. Generally, I'm quite positive and
Yeah. Oh, I
friendly.
absolutely see that in your comedy. It's always such an injection of positivity and really good energy as well. Like I'm quite sort of slow on stage, and Alex Farrow makes fun of how slowly I speak. He's like, "Oh man, you can just write like 4 minutes of material and stretch it out over 15."
That's true. I would do your
But
20 and 2. I honestly would. And
but I love your energy when you come on stage. Has it always been like that? I mean, you mentioned the sort of grumpiness, but that the energy, I guess, has that stayed constant, or is that something you've found and played with and adapted to?
I guess no. I guess I've always been fairly similar in that regard, and I think that again, you are sort of who you are, and naturally, again, not always, but for the most part, especially when I'm engaged and I'm excited, I talk very quickly, and my mind goes quite quickly, and I've got sort of terrible at focusing on one thing at one time, and I'm sort of dog-like enthusiasm for things, and that's how I get on stage, and so I get and I think it is always the way that you like the thing you can't do, but I'm always in awe of the comedians who, like yourself, can take their time and lay out their very considered their words and leave pregnant pauses. I can't, like, in my
Oh my
mind, I've
goodness.
done so many bits where I thought, okay, and then you've got to pause there and really hold the pause and lean into the pause, and then be brave about it. And I do it, and in my mind, start pausing, and I think, oh god, the tension, I can't handle it, and I think it's been hours now, and I cut it short. And when I listen back, when I listen back on the tape, that pause was a millisecond. But in my mind, I was like, God, I've not been talking for ages. Jesus Christ, do something.
I remember.
Sorry, Cam.
I don't know. I think it was something that came out of when I was like studying drama at school or whatever. And yeah, I don't remember a lot of what I was taught at school, but I do remember in drama learning about kind of how to be sort of silent on stage. And like they taught us this thing. My drama teacher was like, stand for 6 seconds on stage in absolute silence in front of an audience, and it is the least comfortable you'll ever feel in the world. But if you just count down that 6 seconds in your head, it's not a long time, even though it feels like a long time. But yeah, if you can get comfortable in that sort of 6 seconds, then you can do it, and it feels like a big thing to do. So yeah, it's something I do. But then I think sometimes I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, and my pauses sometimes during my set, people are like, oh, I think this might be the interval now. I think we should just go and get a drink. And that's my idea of a dramatic pause.
Well, the beauty of mixed bill comedy is such that you get one of each. You get me and you together, and
Yes.
and it works well. You get the shift in dynamics, and I would have benefited from that. I'd like to try that training, that 6 second thing. I think I would benefit from that.
I think it would be it's a fun, but then also I really think I would benefit from speeding things up a little as well. Imagine how many more jokes I could tell, John.
I do a
on
course
10
with
minutes
you
on
where I say,
stage.
right, don't stop talking for 60
And I tell you
minutes.
not to start for a while.
Yeah. What I'm quite
John,
like.
have you always been a musical comedian?
Yes. Well, yes and no. Like well, the way I got into comedy was I was a guitarist in a band. A girl I met at university was a really talented singer, and she was doing sort of clubs in London, and she was just playing the piano and singing. And her manager at the time said to her, I'd get you better gigs if you had a band. And she was quite keen because she was at art school, and she was a bit odd. She reminded me of Anthony and the Johnsons, and that kind of.
Oh, I don't know them.
They're great. I think I became aware of them because they won the Mercury Prize when I was quite young, and
Okay.
well, I say quite young, about 18 or something, and very sort of odd avant-garde singer-songwriter, but brilliant. And she was similar, and she was quite keen not to do things, get some session musicians and things like that. So she just did everything like, John, you play guitar, like it was that kind of thing. So she was brilliant, but she just cobbled together this band out of me because I was a friend of hers, her boyfriend on bass, and a drummer who she just said, it's just a guy in my pub I go to. He's been a drummer in bands for years, and he was much older than us. And it later turned out, much later, that we found out that he was a drummer in Alabama 3, who did the Sopranos theme tune.
Oh, wow.
And had actually been a very successful musician throughout his life, but again kept it light under a bushel. And she was just like, "Yeah, it's John from the pub," and he shaped us into this band, and we started going around the cabaret scene a little bit and doing gigs, and it was really good because she was quite odd, but she was brilliant, and so that was really fun. And we're doing this one gig in particular, this cabaret place called Zolia's 11, I think it was called, but it's no longer exists, I think. But it was right opposite Ronnie Scott's, and it was an imitation basically. And we were doing their gig quite regularly, and I found that they were just, the host would be just the person who owned it basically would host the evenings, and she was saying, "John, you're funny. Do you want to come and be one of my hosts and do some comedy?" I was always talking about comedy and things. I was very into it. And I was hanging around there at the time, so I started that way. And as a result, because it was cabaret, there was a much more music and comedy go hand in hand in that environment. So I started by singing funny songs, and I would host and introduce the acts maybe. And do a little bit of stand-up. And then I decided I want to give this a go, and I moved to stand-up. And when I did, I found that I had my guitar with me. Someone on my first gig said, "Oh, you're not a musical comedian, are you?" And I thought, "Oh God, they must be hated." And I said, "No, because I'm a fickle piece of shit." I was also drinking at the time, and I also found that by the time I had enough Dutch courage in me to perform, I was too drunk to play guitar anyway. So it was a hindrance, and I basically, for the first 2 years of doing stand up, I didn't. Well, first year, sorry, rather year and a half, I didn't do any music, and I did very bad stand up. And then after a while, I decided, what am I doing? Why do I care? And immediately got a lot better when I started doing songs again.
Interesting. Wow. What kind of topics were you tackling when you sort of first started? Is it very different to what the kind of thing that you do now?
When I first started, I don't do any of the songs I first did. They were very cabaret, silly, and there was just no onus on it being anything. The first one I did that was any good, successful, was a song about. Do you remember Victoria Wood? That song, "Let's Do It." You know,
oh yeah, great song.
Barry and Frida.
Yes,
and that was
Smack Me on the bottom with the Woman's Weekly.
Oh,
yeah.
Exactly. Yes, I loved it, and I love Victoria Wood, and I grew up with that, sort of comedy. And I always, then I discovered the song by Cole Porter, the "Let's Do It." What is it? The birds do it, the bees do it, even
Oh
educated
yeah,
Let's do it.
Let's fall in love. Yeah.
Yeah, and basically the Victoria Wood song is an updated version of that. So that song at the time was very risque because you think he's talking about sex, and he's like, "Let's fall in love." Oh, not sex. And that was enough to be raunchy and pushing the boundary. By the time Victoria Wood came around, obviously that's not raunchy enough, so she makes it even raunchier.
Yeah.
But it's still the right side of that. And my argument was that now that seems incredibly tame because we've had 50 Shades of Grey, and so we've had this sexual liberation, and so I did my updated version. So it was called "Let's Do It Like 50 Shades," and it was very twee in English, but it was filthy, and it was all about leave me quivering in my nipple clamps and stuff, and it was it was very, very cheeky and silly, and I never did that in the stand-up scene really because it felt a very cabaret thing. But can
I put a special request in next time you're at Jericho? Could you bring it back?
Let's do it. Yeah, I might do. Well, it's fun. I've never done it since the first. I don't know why, but it also felt like a slightly dated reference suddenly because when I first started doing comedy, 50 Shades had just came out, and it felt quite a zeitgeisty.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I think by the time 2 years later I started doing stand up with music, I felt like it had been covered to death, and already being a musical comedian, people think you're hack as it is. So, so yes, but just for you, maybe I'll bring it back.
I would love that. Yes, a private performance.
Yeah. I've never done one of. There is occasionally these gigs where they say do your first 5 minutes, and
oh god,
and it's kind of felt like it's much more for the one of those gigs that's much more for the comedians than anyone else. But
sure, yeah.
If I ever did one of those, that'd be quite. That's probably where I'd do it. But
that's interesting. That's really. And now a lot of the stuff that you talk about, you're a very kind of committed environmentalist, both outside of comedy. Your work is involved in environmentalism, and you bring a lot of that kind of on stage as well. Do you find that comedy is a sort of a good forum to share that passion with other people?
I think it potentially can be, and I'm always a bit keen to avoid that kind of comedy has got a purpose, and it's our job to inform. I think I don't see the comedian as this truth teller who needs to speak, truth to power, and unless you want it to be. What I see it as is in a similar way to when I went to art school, it was postmodern, and Duchamp settled the argument of what is and isn't art as if the person says it's art, and then it's just, is it good or bad? And I feel the same with comedy. I feel like I'm sick of this. Is that comedy? Is that not comedy? If they say it's comedy, it's comedy. Then you can have a discussion. Is it good or bad? And I think comedy can do anything. And so I love really hard hitting political people. That isn't really me. So I feel like I don't know. And also I feel like that has a very specific audience, and I always think that maybe I don't think anyone's basically been converted very often by stand-up comedy, but
Sure.
I think there is maybe times in Edinburgh where there is a bit more room for it, and I think that there's certain ways you can branch off into it and talk about it. Problem with comedy is there's not enough space for real nuance. So
Mm.
it's got to be funny, but not to just one person. It's got to be funny to a room full of people instantly as well, and at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's got to catch on quick. So there's no room for nuance really. It's broad strokes, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
but within that, you can discuss, relatively complex and nuanced things. But there's limitations, I think. So I do try and cover it and talk about it, but I'm aware that it's not the solution. And actually, you've just got to. But I I don't, I think the people I talk to about it on stage, basically, I'm saying is there's a lot of preaching to the converted, but
Sure. Sure.
I'm keen to try wherever I can to talk about it, and I try not make it so it feels like there's lots of information being pushed down anyone's throat, but it's just being discussed.
Yeah. I guess it's one of those things, isn't it, where like even in the last few years, attitudes and have shifted so much, and there's just been so much more information. Like it seems like only yesterday we were all drinking out of plastic straws for fun, and now like that's a hangable offence to drink
Yeah.
from a plastic straw.
Yes.
And has that sort of shift in the cultural zeitgeist around climate and that kind of thing changed the way that you deal with it on stage, or the amount that you can talk about it on stage?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're totally right, and they call it, I think, the Blue Planet 2 effect. But there was a kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
it's there's just a certain point where things reach a certain critical mass where they become part of that discussion, and it certainly has happened with the environment. More so we have to be careful because we're both in certain liberal elite bubbles, I'm sure, being in Oxford and London.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I think that now that I've got family all over, my mum lives in Glasgow, I've got family in the Midlands where I'm from, and it seems like it is a countrywide thing that
Hmm.
spans political ideology as well. People on the right and left all equally talking about it. So it's reached that point where
Mm.
now I think it is easy to discuss because it's not a heated issue. It's no longer having to
Hmm.
sort of deny it exists as much, prove it exists as much. Um, so I think it's been good for that respect. I think still, like I said, I don't want to talk about too much in terms of stand-up comedy. I think I'm just very aware of where the divide is. If I'm doing a comedy night, a club comedy night, might discuss it, but I'm not going to go on about it too much because
Mm.
that's not what we're there for. But there are avenues like an Edinburgh show. I was very keen to talk about it, and I'm writing for a radio show that I'm trying to make that
Ooh.
would be basically discussing it, which would be sort of half comedy, and there's definitely jokes in there. But I'm taking a lot more influence from things that are like podcasts, like Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, and those kind of podcasts that are very informative and documentary style that can discuss
Mm.
these issues and because at the moment it's been discussed a lot, but there is also a lot of confusion and ambiguity. So it's cutting through a lot of that and trying to find, what can we actually do as people that is achievable as well. That isn't this, you don't have to be a die-hard activist to do like that. We can all do in the day to
Yeah.
day. Something quite practical.
That's really interesting and a really exciting way to kind of do it. Sort of mix the two of kind of information and entertainment. That sounds really fun. Like, I mean, some comedians like Laura Lex have spoken so brilliantly on like the impact that issues like climate have on mental health and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And it can be really overwhelming and a bit frightening and a bit demoralizing. But you're certainly on stage as well. You're a very hopeful, positive person. Ha- Are there reasons, do you think, that we should be optimistic? I mean, things like we're speaking in the week where Joe Biden has been elected and America are going to be rejoining the Paris Convention. Like, that's a very positive, big step. Are
yeah.
there other things, do you think, that we should be feeling good about right now?
Yeah, 100%. I think that it's about getting the balance right, but I think you need a bit of both. You need a
Hmm.
bit of realism and a bit of let's take a long, hard look at what's happening and not take our heads out of the sand. But also, you can't just be focusing on that all the time because it is depressing. So I,
Yeah.
I love what Laura talks about. That it's totally true. And so, yeah, I think that. But luckily, there is reasons to be cheerful, like you said. But Biden winning the election had a huge impact on our carbon footprint. So that's great. And there are always stories coming out like I was just really excited by the what's it called? The Earthshot Prize, I think it's called, which is
I don't know this.
David Attenborough and Prince William, I think it is, have collaborated to start this prize. They've raised £50 million, and there's going to be 50 prizes of £1 million each, given to the 50 best, as they're judged to be, innovations or design ideas that could help design out the issues around climate change in any
that's
way,
amazing.
quite a broad remit. And they're hoping it will be kind of like in future become the Nobel Prize of environmentalism kind of thing. And and I think that really plays into, there's loads of incentives. Also, it's the fastest growing markets in the world right now are all really positive. It feels like, as a recovering alcoholic, I'm pleased to see that non-alcoholic beer is the fastest growing section of the, alcoholic. Not I think everyone should be non-alcoholics, but it's good to see that the next generation have learned better than our generation did about drinking, and can seem to temper it. The same with meat consumption. Like vegan food is the fastest growing thing, and that's the biggest single impact thing you can do as a normal consumer is switch to vegan, because of your carbon footprint. That's becoming easier as well, more accessible. It used to be so hard to do.
I mean, I feel really lucky to have these brilliant conversations with people like yourself on these podcasts, and I learned so much about comedy and like kind of creativity and all sorts through talking to people on these podcasts. But one of the biggest things I've taken away from any of them was when we spoke to Jacob Hawley on the Jericho Comedy Podcast back in episode 3, and Jacob introduced me to Quorn, like Southern fried style chicken. And he said that like it's so close to actual chicken, people can't tell the difference. And I was so snooty, and I was like, that is bullshit. Of course you'll be able to tell. And since then, I think I have been the number one consumer of Quorn in the country. This podcast is not sponsored by Quorn, but my God, it is fueled by it. Exactly. I couldn't believe it. I mean, the extent to which like vegan food is now able to kind of satisfy. Like I would have thought of myself as a very big meat eater, but I have no need to go back to any kind of like processed chicken-y stuff ever, because there's such good alternatives that are obviously very healthy for the planet and that kind of thing. So in
a taste,
but it's a bit of a rotten thing to.
The Quorn nuggets, they're so good, aren't they?
Oh, they're extraordinary, yeah. I mean, I know that I should be taking away bigger things like, about creativity and comedy and learning so much, and I am. But honestly, I think the biggest thing that's changed my life was when Jacob introduced me to the Quorn chicken. And indeed, after we record this podcast, John, I am going downstairs, and my dinner this evening is a Quorn Southern-style chicken burger.
Have you told Jacob that he's impacted your...
I don't think I have. I should really send him a message to kind of say, thank you for changing my life this way.
You know, when you reach out to an old teacher and say, you know what, I didn't realise how much you should do that.
That's so true, yeah. Alex Farrell once told me, as a teacher, of course, that if you ever feel that way about a teacher, you should absolutely get in touch with them.
I did that.
As a teacher himself. Oh, have you done it?
Yeah. Because I had a conversation where someone, it might well have been Alex even, said, you need to write that, email.
Yeah.
Because there was one person that really it was just a particular moment that they really interjected. And it wasn't until years later I thought, God, my whole life hinged on that moment. And without you, I'd have been fucked. And
wow.
So I just thought, and then I said that to someone, and someone went, and have you told them? And I went, no, I don't, it's like, bloody tell them, because it's a hard job. And I was like, of course, I've been a teacher. I know it's a hard job. And so I made sure I did. And I felt a bit embarrassed about it. And true to the testament was he was so lovely in his response that Alex is totally right. And I felt so good about doing it afterwards. So, and the person, and I felt like he wouldn't remember. And of course he carried on talking like it was, he was like, of course I remember this was going to happen. And then this, I realized it stays with them too. And it's definitely back up what Alex said then. Yeah. But
that's really extraordinary.
You need to do that with Jacob. You probably don't remember that podcast, but
I am going to do that this evening. I'm going to send him a message
with a picture.
And I'll let you know how he responds. I'll send him a picture of my dinner.
Yeah.
I'll do the whole Christmas Carol style thing. I'll refer to Jacob as the founder of the feast, like the Cratchit
Oh,
family do with Scrooge.
you boy, go get me a tofurkey as big as they've got. I like it.
That is a superb 21st century Christmas Carol.
a non-religious specific carol. Yeah, we'll call it. It'd be a sort of an updated version of like 21st century version of it. I'll love it.
It's interesting that religion kind of came up there, John, because I think we have something in common in that we're both lapsed Catholics.
Yeah.
Is that something an idea that you've explored a lot?
I love I think so, because I feel like it really influenced me, even if I didn't really, I wasn't particularly a devout myself, and my family weren't particularly. My family were doing it in a kind of performative way, which I think is quite common of our generation.
Sure, to be kind of culturally Catholic without being spiritually. So
yeah, I think so. And it wasn't. My dad wasn't. My dad was Anglican, and so my mum. It was for my grandparents basically that we were doing it. And also, I later found out my mum did what I now know I see a lot of people do, which is doing it for the schools as well. You know, a little bit going to.
Oh yeah.
Want to get you into the Catholic school because she feels like that's a better, whatever you call it, rating.
Yeah.
So isn't it? Yeah, it's all sorts of reasons people go to church, and I think, but it amazes me that people casually. I wish you'd have kept me in the loop on that. Do you know what I mean? I wish people I think people need to talk to children. I'm a real big advocate of keeping children in the loop, even if it's a big issue, because I felt like that's my big takeaway message from being a child is I just felt like I knew what was going on, and your refusal to talk about this is really annoying, and just the confusion that could have been cleared up of being taught through this. Being told, I don't actually think that there is a person watching you all the time. You don't have to, lose sleep over it. Like, as a kid, you take it seriously, don't you? If someone tells you there's someone watching you all the time, it's frightening. Like, I was just so frightened of God until I grew out of it. But, for the first few years, you buy it, hook, line, and sinker, whether or not your parents are doing it for the school or not.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was sold on it, and I was shit scared.
Also, what I couldn't understand, I mean, you've got my favorite Body of Christ joke. It's such a wonderful. I mean, I've now teed it up in a way that I don't know if it's too awkward for you to do it, or it would be more awkward if you didn't.
Well, it just plays on me the idea of me being a sort of like cheeky, flirty 6-year-old who at my first communion misunderstood when he was at the Body of Christ. Oh, thank you very much, Reverend. Not too bad yourself.
I love that. But we were taught as Catholics that the wafer you're about to put in your mouth is the actual flesh of a 2,000-year-old man from the Middle East. And I was terrified of that concept. I'm not eating another person. That's disgusting. I thought we respected this man. Like, why are we eating him still?
I know.
I thought it was morbid.
It is quite morbid. The more you think about transubstantiation, the more essentially it's on magical cannibalism, essentially, isn't it? Like, poor man dies, but every Sunday we bring a little bit of him back to life just so you can eat him again and again.
And why is it okay to eat this guy but not this guy over here?
Yeah,
he looks tasty.
Yeah. I think that there's all sorts of elements, and that people just when you're a kid and and obviously when you're an adult, you can have a conversation with. I used to be baffled that people that I perceived as really intelligent could be Catholic. I remember hearing about neuroscientists and things being Catholic, because when I was a kid I found it also ridiculous. But that was because I was taking it, I guess, wholesale, and adults don't explain to you, listen, by the way, this is sort of quite nuanced. Some of this is quite metaphorical, and some of this is, it's actually quite an interesting mix, of blend of the two. And none of that is introduced as a child, is it? Like, hell is, it's all real, and it's very frightening and scary. And so there's all sorts of ramifications of it. So I do talk about it because it really influences me. And I think that's why I also have an element of me that is very doom and gloom. And also why I'm very camp as well, because that's the aesthetic, let's be honest.
What is it Dylan Moran says about it? He says, candles, incense, wine, you know stuff's gonna happen. Such a great line. But
I
yeah.
love talking about, yeah, he's great like that. Like that line he has about when Angus Deaton was caught with prostitutes, with hookers in a hotel room, giving them cocaine. What are you meant to give hookers in a hotel room? Yogurt? Yogurt, anyone?
I love the resigned tone. It's, what else are you going to give prostitutes in a hotel room?
Yeah. Yogurt, anyone? Yeah, exactly. He's still just the best, and yeah, it's very camp, and it's very there's candles, everyone's wearing fabulous gold jewelry, and everything's beautiful. So yeah, it's interesting, really. But so I joke around about it a bit, but to be honest, I got out there relatively early, and it's not. And I know that some people are affected by it to a much larger degree, so I don't really talk about it. I would never do a show on it, you know.
Sure.
But I have a few jokes, and I think it is a part of me. So
yeah. What kind of things have you been thinking about recently in terms of kind of writing? Are there any big areas that you're quite excited to explore in your writing, or anything you're sort of drawn to at the minute, or are you between interests comedically?
I'm sort of in a mix at the moment. I'm doing this. I'm writing a lot of environmental stuff purely for that show, and then
For the radio, yeah.
yeah, and with the stand up, I'm keen to just keep. I still don't think I've found fully my thing, really, and some it's still a learning process. I have lots of ideas of things to do about that, but then I just don't get to try them. So I've got a whole backlog of little stupid jokes to try.
Oh yeah.
But
Do you, when it comes to writing, is it more kind of, do you think what would make me laugh, or do you start with something that really interests you and then try to find the funny in that, or is it a bit of both, or?
I do think that yes, you've got to follow like what makes you laugh and things like that. But also, I think I was probably a bit too guilty of not thinking enough about what suits me as well. And I think that whilst you're not beholden to anything, you do, you know, it's worth finding out. There are so many people doing comedy, aren't there? And so many different, every different conceivable way. And so you might as well do something like there's things I'd like to do, but there's other people could do that much better than I could, and I could only do it to a so degree. So I have to realize, just sort of be the best you can be, you know, to put it in a cliche, cranky way. But you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, how am I the best? You know, when am I at my funniest? And that's quite hard to figure out. So it's still a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah. It's one of those things, I guess, like, I think a lot of people feel that they're at their funniest when they're sort of relaxing with their mates. You know, like if you're just chatting with some friends over a drink,
Yeah,
and everybody's having a laugh, like that's when you're at your purely like ease. You're at ease. You're at your funniest. But it's a totally different thing to translate that feeling and that kind of confidence and that ease into something on stage, in a way that kind of feels authentically you, but is also written, crafted carefully, and can work for a room full of drunk people on a Saturday night somewhere.
yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, it's about. There's so many bits I have that I had that were my favourite bits, and when they did land, they were landing really well. But that only happened 4 out of 10 times, and that's not enough. And even 6 out of 10 times is not enough. So that there are bits that maybe aren't as funny, but they're hitting 8 or 9 times out of 10. So it's about getting the consistency as well. So it's an absolute minefield stand up. So there's so many bits I like that I really enjoy that I've had to go. And I like to revisit though every now and then to see whether or not like, oh, maybe now I can do it a bit better or make it a bit more clear.
Yeah, that's so true. It must be an interesting process revisiting older ideas with a bit more experience or a bit of distance from them, and be able to kind of say, "Oh, well, I missed something obvious there."
Yeah, I think, and also I think we always forget that obviously we can understand. Obviously, we know what we mean because
Yes, yeah.
we were there for the conception of the idea. We've seen it the whole way through. So it's you know, like me and my girlfriend do it to each other more and more nowadays. Is that because we're so familiar with each other and our modes of thinking, we forget we can't hear what each other think, and we'll start conversations halfway through the comedy.
Yeah.
So we're just like both just doing the washing up, and I'll turn around and go, and she didn't get back to him. And she went, "Sorry, what are you saying? Oh yeah, sorry. At work, and then you have to fill in the rest. I think a lot of the time people, when a joke doesn't land and you're so confused, you're like, but that's so funny, that idea. It's because the idea in your head is not what everyone saw when you said the words you said. And that's maybe what needs revisiting. And so I think that I'm a big proponent of keep hold of that, put it away somewhere, and like you go through old notebooks and see if there's maybe something that, like you said, you were too close to, or talk it through with other people. And because I often talk it through to Hannah, and I'm like, is that not funny like that? And she'll go, oh, I didn't get that's what you meant. I thought you meant, this or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's such a good way of thinking about it. And also, I'm going to cling on to that. Anytime a joke doesn't land, I'll be like, they needed more context. It's not the idea, it's just the way
they're not
I
seeing
did
what
it.
you're seeing. That's all it is.
I'm going to find that very comforting.
Yeah, stand-up is finding a funny image in your mind and then finding the most succinct way of expressing that to a group full of people so they all see that same image in their mind. But it's way harder than many complex.
Yeah, God, I wish. I mean, that's a very succinct way of phrasing the challenge, but it is a quite gargantuan challenge to actually achieve it, isn't it?
Because it's not, because the person who you're doing that to changes, and there's not just one of them, there's 60 of them, and they all form pictures in their mind at different speeds, and each of them form pictures differently depending on all sorts of factors about their upbringing and background, and so it's finding the universal that cuts through all of that and things that you can say in a sentence so that 60 people know exactly what you mean and agree it's hilarious is fucking hard. And so
that is so true.
I'm still learning how to best to do that as me, and still not sure, but we're getting there.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, well, mate, you are flying because we love seeing you at Jericho Comedy. In fact, I think now would be an ideal moment to experience the Jon Long experience. So if you're listening, sit back, grab yourself a drink, close your eyes, imagine you're back in the cozy basement of the Jericho Cafe on a Saturday night, and enjoy the wonderful comedy of our brilliant guest, Jon Long. Here he is.
But I like it there, it's nice. I moved there mainly for employment, not very many jobs going in Lincolnshire at the time, so I moved to steal one of your jobs, and stole one of the good ones too, a waste and recycling factory. Yeah, the tip. Why am I talking up? The tip. I worked at the tip. I was a tour guide. Yeah, no, you're right. It's my mother's face when I told her. I was a tour guide at a tip. Yeah, I used to take school tours, basically. That job probably doesn't exist in Oxford. How are you for recycling in Oxford? You good at recycling? Yeah. Not cycling. Sorry, I sort of stumbled on my words and said cycling there, but I know you're good at that as well. But recycling, you're good? You're pretty good? Yeah? Quite green city? Yeah, London, they're awful, so they need educating. The stuff we were given was shocking. I'm not talking about the wrong kind of plastic either, I'm talking about some objects we were given on the regular. Got so bad I had to write a song about it. A song called You Can't Recycle That. I am going to play this. Can you imagine if I didn't? Sometimes I talk for ages without mentioning it. People are like, you've got that on. Sorry. But yes, sing along at the end. How do you feel about sing-alongs? Yeah, good, fantastic. Mostly apathetic, but that's good. I'll talk you through it. It's going to be absolutely fine. Okay. There are certain types of rubbish that don't go in the bin. Materials we can use again that we call recycling, like paper, cardboard, plastic too, glass and metal tins. But sometimes people get this wrong and they give us other things. So I feel the need to clarify so that we can get things clear about some things you can't recycle we've received throughout the years. And I want you to all bear in mind these are 100% genuinely true examples from London. Are you all bearing that in mind? And don't shoot the messenger. Alright. You can't recycle dead cats. I shouldn't need to say that. And yes, at least 2 or 3 times a year. I made that dramatically lower to make you feel better. Someone sends us through a dead cat. London. You can't recycle bullets. No. Or deactivated hand grenades. They look remarkably similar to non-deactivated hand grenades. Shat myself, very hard work. You can't recycle dildos. No. But seriously, we got lots and lots of those, and we don't know where they've been. By that I mean we know exactly where they've been. Stop sending us dildos. I'm not addressing you, obviously. You're an intelligent crowd and you wouldn't do such a thing, but in the late noughties in Wandsworth, something of an epidemic. I don't know what it is. I think people think out of sight, out of mind. Or at least they used to. We know better now. We've seen Blue Planet. We know it all has to go somewhere. Sometimes, though, it affects you on a much more localised level that doesn't get the Attenborough attention. And this is a true story, and I kind of wish it wasn't. I once had to take a tour group around the recycling centre. And the tour group comprised of 15 women in their 80s. It was a WI group and was stood at the conveyor belts. We were confronted by a dildo, yes. And I was forced to explain to all of them what a dildo was. And it's a very noisy building. They were hard of hearing, so I had to shout, it's a sex thing! 15 women in their 80s. And in hindsight, I think they definitely knew what it was. Yeah, they were fucking with me, weren't they? Yeah. A cat with a mouse, cruel really, it took me 4 years to work that out. And I don't want to explain to an 80-year-old woman what a dildo is again. Everybody now, I get involved, Oxford. I don't want to explain. Oh, very good already. This is great. To an 80-year-old woman. I'm not confused. The people are still eating upstairs. It's good. What a dildo is again. And just the fellas now. Why? Don't let me down, fellas. I don't want to explain. Nice and bassy. I'm loving it. To an 80-year-old woman. Oh, nice lungs on you, Leeds. I'm loving that. What a dildo is again. Ladies, now it's your turn. Oh, beautiful. I don't want to explain. Immediately in with the harmonising. Fantastic. To an 80-year-old woman. This is beautiful. It's never sounded this good. Fantastic. What a dildo is. And one last time now all together. I don't want to explain. Really get into it. I don't want to an 80-year-old woman of all people. Swaying is a lovely touch. Thank you in the back. What a dildo is again. So stop sending us dildos. Great singing, everyone. Well done. Very good. God, this really feels like X Factor. It does. Look at you three.
Jon, there comes a moment in every comedian's life when they've got to face up to the pressure cooker that is pressing questions. We have mutual friends who have simply not been the same since they stepped into the firing line on these questions. And I'd love nothing more than to let you off the hook, but it's company policy. So now I've got to ask you a series of difficult, frankly indecently challenging questions. And all I need from you are some honest answers. Can you do that for me?
I can try.
All right, Jon. Question 1. How is cheddar cheese made?
In caves.
In caves?
Yeah, is that right?
By goblins. Oh, I don't often have the answers. I just like to hear people's opinions.
I think cheddar's made in caves. Because cheddar gorge is a thing. What's a gorge? Is a gorge a cave? I don't know.
It sort of sounds like it's in the cave family. It's like if a cave and a valley had a love child.
In my mind, cheese was invented because someone left some curds and whey somewhere and went away. And they hid it in a cave because back then curds and whey were really valuable and people were trying to steal it from you. And then when they came back, they were like, oh God, it's all congealed into this disgusting. But actually,
And then they got some chutney out and they were like, oh my God, get in here.
That person, what we don't learn about is all the different things that person ate that weren't delicious.
It's like, I left some poop and worms in here.
Just that one,
and it didn't taste as good as the last thing.
I think it was like a Boy That Cried Wolf scenario. It was like, I found this thing, it's delicious, it's cheese. Listen, the last thing you discovered in a cave that you made of meat, cave the village, halved our population, mate. So let's lay off.
I love thinking about like the first people to have done things. Like the first person to have eaten a lychee. Like think of the process there. Like they peeled it and they're like, oh, it's an eyeball. But they still ate it. And they're like, oh, actually. Or like the first person to have discovered a potato. Think of all the iterations they went through before they realized, I think you have to cook it. Like,
yes.
It's just astounding to me. Those brave pioneers that allowed us to enjoy a simple baked potato.
Me too. And not all of them get so lucky as the Earl of Sandwich and get these names after them. Do you know what I mean? Like, most of them are unsung heroes as well. There's no Geoffrey Cheddar, is there? It's named after some gorge. Oh, it got named after the cave, did it? Oh, sure.
I think you need to write the embittered memoirs of Geoffrey Cheddar.
Yeah.
I would read that book.
By history.
John, what would you say is your simplest pleasure?
My simplest pleasure, I think, because it's so childlike, is collecting things.
Oh, what do you collect?
I used to, as a child, I was obsessed with football cards and pogs and Tazos and anything like that, and anything you would get out of cereal packets and Happy Meal toys and things like that. And I loved collecting stuff like that. And so as an adult, I obviously haven't got the room, and I'm also an adult and I shouldn't be doing this sort of thing anymore. But I still will occasionally indulge in just buying a pack of football cards or something, and I still have the pleasure of opening I know it's terribly single use, but it still gives me a lot of pleasure. I had to stop doing it properly because oh god, Connor, this is so depressing. When I was a kid, there was a system whereby like you would write into these clubs, like say a sticker club, and you would it would give you a form with all the different stickers available, and you would write down on X's which ones you had, and you would put it out there, and they, in their computer wisdom, before we all had our own, that they would come back and send you, here's someone who's got all the ones you need and you've got a lot of the ones he needs, here's his address.
Oh wow, yeah.
You would write to them and then you would exchange cards, and it was this whole, it was most of the way I communicated. It was most of my social life when I was a child in the middle of nowhere. So
it also sounds like it's a system built on trust, so I'm assuming this is a happy story.
Yes, well, no, listen, I don't know how many of the people I was writing to were, from, whoever they were. I don't know. It isn't that kind of a story, though. You'd be pleased to know. But years later, I was in my 20s and I started collecting, and I was keen not to, and I don't want to waste loads of cards going through trying to get the collection. You end up wasting so many before you get there. You've got all these swaps.
Of course.
I'm an adult now. I don't have anyone to swap with, similar to when I was a child. I didn't live near any kids. I went online to see if there was a similar model, and there is, and it's online now, and it's so much easier because you just click in who's got what and blah, and you send off these cards. But then after 2 or 3 exchanges, I almost finished the collection, but I had to stop because I was sending off all these cards beautifully packaged, and I was getting back all these letters, which the handwriting was like clearly an 8-year-old, and I was like, I am so sad. I'm getting as excited about getting, Malenko. I don't know what it was at the time. Some obscure right back at the time that I couldn't get hold of. And I was getting the same amount of pleasure of that as this kid. I was like, this wasn't built for me, was it? So I had to...
I remember... sorry.
No, I was finished, sorry.
I've got a sob story about... there was really only 1 year where I was like totally invested in the Panini football sticker album. Oh yeah. And it was for the 95-96 season. And I somehow managed to get every single sticker in the album except, I don't know if you remember, there used to be like on a double page spread at the back, after the double page spread with the squad individual player photos, there'd then be over the next page like some information, and then 2 stickers that would form one picture of like the club captain or the star player. And I had every sticker in the album except for Steve Bruce's arse and legs. And to this day, when I see Steve Bruce walk out on the touchline, I can't help but look at his bum and just think, the one that got away. And it hurts me to this day, John. But yes, it's an excellent hobby to have.
I love
stickering.
I love longingly looking at Steve Bruce's ass.
Oh, and he's flaunting it, you know.
He's been a lot of things to a lot of people, that man. I'm sure, but
including the author, of course, of Striker, the detective story.
Oh yeah, God, I loved that podcast. I haven't listened to all of it, but the particularly the, what is it called? Quickly Kevin, the John Schwiddicombe podcast about 19
yes.
Him
and this is where Ivo talks about it. Yeah.
Yes, and those two episodes where they go through it, is some of the best content of any kind I've ever listened to. I've never laughed so much in my life. It's great. It really is. Yeah.
All right, John, have you ever run a marathon?
I have not run a marathon. One of my ex-partners had run marathons, and so seeing firsthand the training for it put me off the line. No.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it just sounds like such an unpleasant thing. You have to run 26 miles.
Yeah, I don't think any of them have thought it through.
No.
People that do it more than once baffle me. And
yeah,
to be honest, if I could, I probably would. There is an element of me that enjoys that put yourself through something, but that is only enjoyable if you have a talent for enduring that thing. So I like going to Edinburgh, and when everyone's like, I'm taking a day off, I take pleasure in never taking a day off and doing 2 shows a day and
oh my word,
you know, because it doesn't feel like a effort because I'm enjoying it so much. Whereas I'm sure to the people doing the marathon, everyone's like, why are you doing that? But to them, they enjoy running so much, it doesn't feel like an effort. And I do take pleasure in people thinking, that's mad. So I get it, but I could never do it. Fuck off. No way.
I think yours sounds harder, though, not having a day off all of August.
No, thank you. I love it. I used to love that. I actually really enjoyed the time off from Edinburgh, weirdly. I thought I would hate it, but I realised I did need a summer holiday because I work with schools, so I've never had a summer holiday because I just spent it in Edinburgh.
Of course, yeah.
And it was quite enjoyable, but I used to take a lot of pleasure in doing, plowing through, and everyone's like, "When's your day off?" I haven't got one, mate. Day off. Day off
when I'm dead.
Yeah. I love my dad there. My dad used to say, "So and so is for wimps," a lot. And it could be anything. It could be like snoozing for wimps. Honestly, it was ridiculous.
Call me a wimp because I love a snooze.
Yeah.
John, who would win a physical confrontation between you and Santa Claus?
I think Santa Claus. I knew the answer to that question before you started saying the word Santa. So the answer is the second person you're about to mention.
Are there no exceptions to that? Like we couldn't throw in,
no,
I know, like Kermit the Frog.
No, Kermit the Frog would snap me like a twig.
That's right. He's quite spindly, I suppose. He looks like he's dexterous.
Yeah, I don't know really. I think Santa is also famously, probably quite a big guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he looks like he's competing in some sumo.
He'd just destroy you.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, and a bit of a drunk. He does have an air of he looks like a kind of Ernest Hemingway, slightly aggressive alpha male type. He's got that slightly alcohol potched skin and the feeling of, I don't know. He was always pictured as someone I wouldn't like to mess with. So I think I'd.
That's extraordinary. There have been so many different depictions of Saint Nick in film, and I don't think I've ever quite seen the version that you're describing, where he's just a badass bar brawling drunk.
Maybe I think we're always influenced, aren't we, by the Santas our dads became at Christmas, and.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm joking. That wasn't that. Maybe I just went to a really terrible Santa at the fete. You know what I mean? Like maybe they just kept hiring the local drunk or something. And I was a kid. I don't know.
All right, well, John, give us a bit of a fuller picture of your background in terms of nationality. Like, is there a playful dash of Dutch in there? A little sprinkle of Spanish anywhere?
No, I'm quite boring in that respect, sadly. I wish I was more exotic. I was born in Scotland, and my mum's Scottish, and my dad's English, but he's half Welsh, so there's a bit of Welsh in there. But for the most part, I'd say, I mean, English in terms of that's where I was brought up and I've lived all my life, but I've got Scottish blood in me there somewhere, and yeah.
Scottish and Welsh, just enough to hate the English part of yourself.
Yeah, I'm a self-loathing Englishman, which is,
and that's your nature. You can't help that.
I didn't need to say so. You don't need to say that. Sorry. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't know. What about yourself? Have you got an interesting mix?
Oh no, I'm like Irish as a potato. Like, I think if I did a kind of genealogy background, it would come back like 98% Irish, 2% other Irish. Like, just, yeah, 2%, unfortunately.
Yeah, Isle of Man or something, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to think that there's like a sort of Latino passion in me, but really it's just a kind of Irish resignation.
Yeah, my girlfriend
found
out she had a bit of Iberian blood in her, and that was all really exciting.
Oh, wow, that's very exciting.
While the Portuguese person has swept one of my grandparents off their feet at some point, but I've got none of that. They've all stayed true, and I don't know, maybe just got racist. No, keep it in the family. And then they all one of them decided to venture to Scotland from the north, and then they settled on the Midlands. I don't know, but it's boring and stuff. There it is. Hate it.
It is what it is, and you're a lovely man for it.
Well, it's very sweet of you too, Connor.
Oh, you. John, if you were a triple threat, what would you consider your 3 threats to be?
Triple threat. I can't do any of the traditional triple threat qualities. My triple threat would be pandering, fawning, brown nosing. I can. Oh yes. Yeah.
When Jon Long's around, not an ass will go unkissed.
I used to be obsessed with this program Monkey World about it was some sanctuary in Devon somewhere where they rescue monkeys and they look after them.
Okay.
Run by this American couple, and there was a documentary series about them, and it was talking about all the different ways that monkeys can climb the hierarchy, chimpanzees in particular. And it was there was these 2 chimpanzees who were the alphas, and one of them had climbed that by being incredibly strong physically, and it would confrontations and things like that. The other one, there is another way. There are some monkeys who can get up the chain by just grooming. That's all they do. They find the biggest fucker there, and they just sit by them and groom them, and they sort of like their hype man. They kind of go, yeah, exactly, and I agree, and they just sit around and they climb their way, and they are alphas, and no one messes with them because they have the same status, but they're there because they've just groomed the hell out of everyone. Everyone loves them. I'd be that monkey, is what I'm saying. So.
That is brilliant to know where you are on the evolutionary scale and the role you would play in nature.
I'm incredibly determined. I'm going to climb that hierarchy, but I've got no discernible macho skills. What can I do? I can try and be nice to everyone. Which is, it's harder than it sounds. I made a conscious decision to try and be nice, and it's fucking hard.
Oh, yeah. I admire you. I definitely don't stick to that at all.
I think you're one of life's nicest people, Connor.
What I have is a tremendous commitment to being seen as being nice.
Oh, that's true. Are we secretly both bastards?
I think I can only speak for myself, but certainly, yeah, I think I'm about 60% bastard, I think.
Well, I think all the more credit to you for only displaying the nice 40% then, and keeping that in check. Because it's a choice we all make. I think that's it. Everyone's a bastard sometimes, and people that are bastard all the time, it's like, the villain in a movie, like they're a bastard to everyone, and then like they save like one cat out of a tree, and everyone's like, oh, maybe they are sensitive, and they're judged on that one good thing they did. Like Ebenezer Scrooge, we mentioned him earlier, but yeah, like
He was an absolute rotter for his entire life, and then he gave a turkey to the Cratchits, and finally gave Bob some coal, and suddenly everyone was like, he is
Off
a
the hook.
sweetheart.
It's very Catholic, actually, when you think about it, isn't it?
Yeah, really is. All's forgiven.
Oh,
what a
don't you
nice
worry about
thing.
it. Yeah, my dad used to say he used to play football with a five-a-side team on Sunday, and he said it was so funny because he knew them from their local pub. And he said they were all Catholics, and he said they'd go out on Saturday, drink as much as they possibly could, all cheat on their wives, have a fight, and then they'd quickly pop to church and for a bit of a confession. And he said they're treating it like a shower, like it was just like in Grand Theft Auto you got the pay and spray. They were treating it like that. If I get there before I'm caught, everything's fine. Do you know what I mean?
That's brilliant. Catholic pay and spray.
Yeah.
Actually, that's quite a different thing.
Yes. Yeah. Oh god.
John, do you think that Richie Rich grew up to be genuinely happy, or was he just a wealthy child?
I think Richie Rich for sure died of some overdose, didn't he? No, Richie Rich is. I think Richie Rich is fine. Do you know what? Richie Rich probably had the same life as Macaulay Culkin. Had a really horrible wilderness years, and that's come out the other end as actually quite a thoughtful, sweet person.
Interesting person.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think he kept that McDonald's running through all those years in his house, or do you think he reached a point where he was like, "No, guys, this is gauche"?
I think they got furlough. Do you know what I mean? Like the 20 staff at the McDonald's.
That is the furlough question that we should all be asking.
Yeah.
John, my final question for you is that do you believe in or adhere to any superstitions?
No. No, but I have a great admiration for the beauty of the poetry around superstitions. And I like the aesthetic of it. And I do think that there is some sort of metaphysical debate to be had about what makes things real. And whether or not, and I think I was very clinical when I was younger, and definitely a anti-theist person who read too many books by angry white men about why religion is wrong. And I think I agree with parts of it, but I do think there's room in the world for it. But at the heart of it, no, I really have always lacked the ability to believe in anything slightly supernatural at the heart of it. Sadly.
I think I'm that kind of annoying level where I absolutely do not believe any of it. And yet, every time I see a magpie, I still find myself saluting it.
Yeah, there's something enjoyable about certain rituals, isn't there? Even if you know they're ridiculous.
Yeah. It's a bit
sometimes we,
weird.
As humans, I think, benefit from those, and we've taken a lot of them away. So keeping a few arbitrary ones, just to give us a little sense that there is some sort of order, even when there's not, it's it's nice.
In the same way, I consciously made a decision last week during the US election not to wear any red or drink from a red mug or eat anything red for 3 days, and then the blue Democrats came out on top, and I was like, yeah,
and
you're welcome, world.
Who's to say that the two weren't correlated in some way or another?
Exactly.
I like stuff like that. But also, I don't like when people say, if I put the TV to 35, it has to be 35, not 34. Someone will say, well, there's no real difference between 35 and 34. Well, there is, because 34 will give me an anxiety attack. And so...
I am so with you. Do you have certain numbers that the volume has to be?
Yeah, things like that. So there's definitely a sort of, not an OCD, I'm aware it's not that, but you know what I mean? An element of...
Yeah. Well, it's just...
symmetry to them.
Some of them are just... It's what separates us from the animals.
Yeah.
Who on earth has the TV volume at 27? What kind of maniac are you?
Someone would kill, I think.
They've killed before and they will again.
Yeah. And they won't leave it on a round number. They'll just keep going. They don't care,
those people are the worst.
Kill 7 people, 12 people. Outrageous.
Well, there we go. Now we know a little bit more about what John thinks about some things. And coming up next, I'm going to be asking John for some hard opinions. First, though, have a little listen to a message from our wonderful charity partner, Oxfordshire Mind.
Oh, Oxford Safe Haven is open on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday evening from 6pm till 10pm. The phones are open from 5 and the last booking is at 9pm. To refer yourself to Oxford Safe Haven, just give us a call on 01865 903037.
Now it's the point in the podcast where I ask Jon for some of his hard opinions. Jon, I'd like to explore some of your most extreme opinions on things that you might not have even realised until just now that you've actually got extreme opinions on. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Fantastic. Well, Jon, what is your hard opinion on friendship?
Overrated. They say no man is an island, but that's because I think the person that wrote that was one of those needy extroverts who needs to always have someone around to justify their own existence. Friendships weigh you down. Oh, I need to make a decision. What's best for everyone? Taking ages. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? Or, what do I want to do? That. Good. Let's do it. Much quicker. Streamlined. Friends are not streamlined. Friends are like... They are burrs in a bird's wing that slow it down and drive it off course. I mean, it hits a car window. It's...
That is a very hard opinion on friendship.
Yeah.
To any of Jon's friends who are listening in,
sorry, marzipan.
I'm sorry you had to find out this way.
I meant to say marzipan. Marzipan can find it. No. Friends are all right, actually.
Yeah, in reality. Jon, what's your hard opinion on the colour yellow?
I love it to not as much as like Van Gogh level love it, but I love it. And do you know what I found out about Van Gogh is that he was used to dip his to get his paints brush to a point. He would use his tongue. He would with oil paints, use his tongue, which is a terrible thing to do, particularly at the time because of the amount of stuff that was in paints back then.
Yes, I would imagine there are some seriously lead-based paints back in
very, very leady and all sorts of stuff in there. And one of the conditions that came from ingesting this quantities of this stuff that he was this type of fever that one of the effects of it is it increases the perception of the colour yellow. The people that have it see yellow very, very brightly and vividly. So he poisoned himself slowly over time, and you can weirdly see it in his work. He starts going yellower and yellower, and everyone's like, "What a great artistic decision!" It's like, no, lead poisoning. That's what it was.
That is something to watch out for, which might have contributed in some part to my opinion that the colour yellow is just the worst colour. I believe it tries too hard. If something's yellow, it's like, I'm so happy I'm practically yellow. Fuck off, yellow.
No, do you know what? I would almost... I agree with you with yellow clothing. Yellow... But I have a soft fondness for... When I was a kid, I never got one, but all the object of my desires was a Game Boy Pocket that was yellow, right?
Ooh,
basically because my neighbour had one. And so I really wanted that specific one, and I got myself a Nintendo Switch, and I made sure I bloody got the yellow one as an adult. For that reason. But you're right.
Take that, childhood!
It's a very childhood colour, and once you hit 20, you put aside such childish things as yellow and...
So if you are over the age of 20 and you have yellow clothing, have a look at yourself.
Yeah, it's
I would actually
Halloween. If you're over 20 and you still do it, have a bloody look at yourself.
I should probably mention at this juncture that I am someone who has a lot of mustard jumpers. My wife likes me in mustard, and so I distinguish between yellow and mustard, but that is really just a semantic thing, if we're being entirely
Every
honest.
rule needs one exception, I think, and mustard.
Yeah, and I think mustard's just great.
Yeah.
Jon, I'd like your hard opinion, please, on Pringles.
Pringles are just absolute garbage and a triumph of how the packaging can be so alluring, so inviting, that it fools you into thinking that the thing you're eating isn't utter shit. Like, Pringles are so much fun to eat, and everything about the experience is great. But honestly, if you put them in any other container, in any other shape, you wouldn't be having it. As justified by Walker's terrible baked range. It's bullshit. Walker's baked. Have you ever had those? They're basically Pringles, but all of the interesting, fun dynamics of Pringles taken away from it. So you're just left with the core ingredients, and it's awful. And do you know? I think that it's the same with Dairy Lunchables. God, that promised so much.
Oh yeah,
experiential thing, and then when you actually ate it, oh god, it was just the worst quality everything. Even the cheese was shit. You're like, you're a cheese company. This is outrageous.
It's like, you had one job.
It's like why
are you bad at this?
It's like we've got loads of offcuts of stuff. What do you mean? Well, we've got we've got all the cracker range and the ham range and the cheese range. Yeah. Well, we've got from each of those three sectors, we've got all those little shitty little bits of it that have fallen off and gone stale. Put them together in a package. Have to assemble it. No, they'll do it themselves, the fuckers. Like a terrible IKEA lunch.
Except it hasn't even got a fun umlaut anywhere in the name.
Yeah, if they
to
were
make it fun to say.
Lunchables, then we'd have Lunchbuttons.
Dairy, if you're listening, if you use that, you owe Jon Long money.
Thank you. I have to do with that, Dairy. Thank you.
Well, John, my final thing that I would like for you to express a hard opinion on.
Sure.
It's a doozy. I want to know what you think of ballet.
Ballet. Do you know what's really funny? I did go to see ballet once. My parents are really interested. But both working class, but a mixture of one's very determined and one's a social climber. So they bloody bolster their way into the middle class. And by Jove, in short, I talk like this, despite not actually having the funds for any kind of private education. But they're just militant from home. And one of the elements of social climbing is that the idea that we used to go before that kicked in later in life. At the beginning of life, we just embraced our working class roots, and we would go and just eat burgers at Charlie Chalks and fucking Wacky Warehouse, and that was our days out. But then when we went to London and things, my dad started saying, well, maybe we should go and see something in the theatre. And so we all went to see like a musical, and it was amazing. And then one time he went, we're not going to go for the musical this time. We're going to go for something a little bit more classy. And he took us to ballet. And I don't know if you've been to the ballet as a child. Oh, dear Lord. It's so tedious and boring. But I'm really glad he did, because it proved to me, I just remember distinctly thinking, if this is what the world of the posh elite is like, I want no part of this. It can keep itself.
Nothing more likely to turn you into a pinky lefty socialist than bringing a child to ballet.
Yeah, you can hear them hit the floor really loudly. They walk around the place. Like,
it sounds like you went to a very bad ballet, John.
Apparently it was just the guy, now that I think about it. He came to our house.
My understanding, I'm no ballet dancer, but my understanding is that that's supposed to be quite graceful and smooth.
Yes. Honestly, I swear to God, this was a high-end ballet. But one thing, ask anyone that's been to the ballet how surprised they are by the sound. I remember distinctly going, oh God, you can hear them. Like, because in your head, they're graceful and they barely touch the floor. But in reality, they jump really high. And as they hit the floor, it's like a big boom. And
it sounds like a person landing on the floor again.
Yeah. And you're like, well, that's taking me right out of it. You're not at all.
This is a collective sham.
Yeah, exactly. It's farcical. Give me a cheap local panto any day with one of the gladiators. Doesn't even have to be one of the main gladiators. Doesn't even have to be Wolf.
It's something I'm endlessly fascinated by. What do you think Wolf is doing nowadays? I mean, he played by nobody's rules. Surely he's in prison somewhere.
For drug running and yeah.
Yeah. Or just like probably something more basic, like a lollipop man told him not to cross the road, and Wolf being Wolf was just like, fuck that.
He took his
cross the road anyway.
Yeah.
Just mild civil disobedience.
Yeah, picturing him engaging with the lollipop, like a fight with the lollipop lady, and he's got one of those. She's got the lollipop stick. He's got one of them double-handed, whatever the hell they were called.
Oh, and he knows how to use it as well.
Oh, the
unfair advantage.
Because that was called the pugil stick or something. Yeah.
Oh yeah, God, that does ring a bell.
Mm.
Well, there we go. Not only have we covered ballet, but a
mind.
bonus Wolf from Gladiators reference there for everyone.
Yeah. That's for all you 90s kids. Yeah.
John, it has been so lovely chatting to you on the Jericho Comedy Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Lovely to speak to you, Connor. Thanks for having me.
We should point people in the direction of your wonderful EP. Where do we go to find more Jon Long things?
Oh yeah, so the EP is still on. It's on Bandcamp, so you can either Google my name, Jon Long, and then Bandcamp, and it'll come up. It's called the Self Isolation EP. Or if you follow me on Instagram at Jon Long Stand Up, it's the link on my profile there.
Excellent. Well, we will add links to both of those into the episode description. And John, I really can't wait until Jericho Comedy we're back up and running regularly again, and we get to see you come along and entertain our lovely audience again.
Oh, I can't wait to be back.
John, thanks so much. Speak to you soon, mate.
Bye, Connor, mate. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. There we go. John is so terrific, and honestly, I think he might be the loveliest person in comedy too. If you've seen John before, you'll know just how funny he is, so make sure you give him a follow on Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff. And of course, check out his Lockdown EP. We'll add links into the episode description so you can follow all of those. Obviously, we're in lockdown, so we have no shows at the moment, but we're making big plans for our return in December, and we have some big news about our annual Oxfordshire Mind Gala. Tickets are online now for our wonderful shows at the beautiful North Wall in Oxford. We're going to have some really top acts performing to raise funds for a really worthy cause. So head to www.jerichocomedy.com to snap up your tickets before they sell out, which they really will. They always do. Check back next week when I'll be chatting to another wonderful Jericho Comedy performer. But until then, thank you so much for listening and bye-bye.